Welcome to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures, with CEO and award-winning author, Yvette Bethel. This podcast is dedicated to providing leaders with solutions to build trust, inspire authentic transformation, and improve engagement. Learn about new and tested ways you can revitalize your culture, empower people, and transform your results.
This is Yvette Bethel, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Evolve. Evolve explores modern leadership topics and cultural transformation potentials using the interconnectivity, flow, and balance methodology, which is grounded in trust, integrity, and emotional mastery. We will explore ideas that translate into theories and practical action that you can apply to simple and complex organizational challenges. This episode is the first of a two-part conversation that introduces the IFB concepts of balance and flow in the context of quantum leadership. To support me in this exploration is Edwin Clamp. Edwin's professional practice is focused on helping companies develop and implement long-term innovation. He's an expert in quantum leadership and the application of quantum principles in business. He has broad and deep competencies in traditional executive functions such as foresight, mergers and acquisitions, finance, law, risk management, and marketing. With a substantial educational background and experience across many disciplines such as statistics, math, biochemistry, biology, healthcare, business, engineering, software engineering, and education, Edwin brings a unique voice to Evolve. Let's jump right into the conversation.
This idea of balance is just really, really important to the functioning of the system and the tension.
And for too long, I think there are a lot of systems in place that cause us to engage with our ecosystem in a certain way without even thinking about it. So what I'm proposing is that instead of just engaging our ecosystems the way that we've habitually done it, become more deliberate about creating ones that are healthy. And I'm not talking about something perfect or some utopian ecosystem. I'm just talking about something that's healthy and with trust-based connections. And not even with everyone, because everyone won't trust everyone. And that's just, the way it is. But certainly you can still have a healthy relationship without that deep vulnerability happening.
Yeah, and I think this is another, there's this term divide and conquer, and so you divide and these people are your enemies and you conquer them. The Cartesian mode of thought there is, analysis, which is we saw in Bloom's taxonomy, which is the essence of the Cartesian mode of thought, is lysis, which is the division or the breaking apart, which is the antonym of synthesis, which is in the IFB model, right? Mm-hmm. So we have an opposite mode of thought. So I think we can move away from this antagonistic relationship in our ecosystems that, in a sense, we tend to have this implicit idea that all the others are somehow, we're in an antagonistic relation with them. The customer even, we tend to often see as threatening to our bottom line. We need to make sure they don't take too much and, let's make sure we get the most value out of them. To this mode of an integrative, what's the word I'm looking for here? Collaborative, a synergistic, that's the word that I'm looking for. Okay. This relationship where we're all, in a sense, we're all better off because of the other, which in a sense is the reality, because
Mm-hmm.
No organization out there would survive in a barren environment. If you're in construction, you rely on the ecosystem of people to make a project happen. If you're in technology, you're really working in the ecosystem of technology, and pretty much goes for every system out there. It's an ecosystem, and we have a dependency on each one of those players in the system, whether it be the janitor or the insurance provider or whatever. We have a relationship or a dependency on there. So it's much better for us to look at that with a sense of balance, where we're seeing the positive relationship there as well as maybe the tension. I don't want to say the negative relationship, but there's always a tension there. But this is part of life. I mean, there's always the trade-off, and what we're going for here is really beneficial arrangement.
There are two things that I was considering while you were, talking just now, and one is that I think you talked about there being dependency on each player. I think it goes beyond. I think it's more interdependent.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In order for it to be healthy. And the other thing that I was considering was, in each tension, there's this masculine quality that's, hard and fast, maybe competitive or whatever you want to call these masculine qualities. And then there's the feminine quality within attention that's more nurturing, accepting, inclusive, and that type of thing. And the more I look at tensions, the more I see that, most of them have on one end is masculine representation of something, and the other end is some feminine, almost like a yin and yang kind of thing. And
yes.
And I think the point that you make with the whole the symbolism of the masculine and feminine, it should not be separate. When they are working in an interconnected way.
Yes.
So both are present, but they're not opposing.
Yes.
They're actually enhancing.
Yes. And I think you really keyed in on something here. Again, the Cartesian mode of thought is always to separate. And so what we've done is we said, masculine, feminine, and they're completely different. But in the sense that they're really like this. They're just expressions of the same system. I mean, the same biological system.
Right.
It's just shifted expressions. And really what we see is this continually this continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need to try to now do is to integrate those and find the synergy that the broader wisdom can bring to how we look at situations.
Yeah.
So in your model, how do you see, or what's the importance of flow? Because we have interconnectivity, balance, and flow. How does that work in your model there that you?
It works in a number of ways. In a lot of ways, it's the product of interconnectivity and the quality of that. It's also something in the balancing effort that you're paying attention to,
mm-hmm.
so that you can determine if some tensions are creating challenges with flow, and so that you can take an action with how people connect or how the processes connect with each other, so
mm-hmm.
that you can alter the way the flow is happening. Because flow is something that is very important to producing results
mm-hmm.
within an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So if that flow isn't happening the way the strategy dictates, then you have to calibrate and recalibrate until you get it to where you want it to be. Sometimes, so flow can do with pace, how fast you're producing, or getting things done, whatever that is. It can have something to do with rhythm, because sometimes it's more cyclic. So flow is a very big part of the model, although we talk about it, some kind of secondary consideration. It's really an output, but it's also much more than that. Because there are mechanics behind the flow that you really need to pay attention to.
Yes.
And when you get, and I've worked with teams before where you can step out of that whole mechanical process of flow with making sure that the rate and pace or whatever rhythms are operating the way you anticipate, and you're stepping into a zone. And I've seen this happen with teams where they get into a zone of creativity where time just collapses. And, everybody's in. Everybody's on the same wavelength. Everybody's one entity operating in that whole integrated way.
Yeah.
And that's another very powerful application of flow, but you can't get there on a linear path.
Yeah, and I think as I'm listening to you talk, I'm seeing flow in two contexts within your organization. So what you just described there is the synergy that comes from the flow of a group and the creativity and the value add that can bring to the organization. The other one for me is the flow of leadership. It is still a concept that we hold to and have leaders. So the thing I think is critical for leadership today to understand is the liability that linear thinking can bring to their organization, because especially in industries that are going through this, in a sense, the rate of change is picked up. So, for example, technology comes to mind, but there are other ones, medicine, and a lot of the service industries are being radically disrupted. And so the ability for a leader to move out of linear thinking, so this is the trajectory, this is our strategy, this is where our organization is going to be in 20 years, and to shift their mentality from that linear mode of thought to this more dynamic, interactive, flowing, balanced mode of thought, where they're, in a sense, really interfacing with the environment, looking for the flow, seeing where their organization fits, adapting the organizational model to changes, and we can look at a lot of case studies where organizations have radically transformed. They've basically reinvented themselves. And for me, this is the benefit that leadership flow can bring versus organizations that refuse to reinvent themselves and just became irrelevant.
So really what you're describing is leaders operating in that IFB learning kind of place.
Yes.
As opposed to the linear model.
Yeah, and it's very, very interesting to me because, when you look at it from the Cartesian mode of thought, classical physics, particle physics, you look at this idea of trajectory, and we have a linear model, the Bloom's. And so there's this assumption that what starts here will just continue on. And this goes back to the kind of the scientific mode of thinking where you take all the variables away. Now we're moving into dynamic systems, complexity theory, etc. This assumption that the trajectory will just continue on in a smooth pattern as though something was floating through space isn't valid anymore. We have disruptions. We have all kinds of things happening in our environments that continually push the trajectory of an organization one way or another. And so the leadership now has to really, in a sense, be in the flow to continually sense what currents are changing. So now it's more of a sensing experience, an intuitive experience, rather than this cold calculation. If we take X, Y, and calculate it out, it's going to be over here in 5 years. That's not a relevant mode of thought.
But really, that attunement, once you learn to attune and use the skills required to create a healthy IFB organization, you will develop the skills you need to attune to your environment. Because it's a whole new group of skills. You're not just leading in a linear way and this is how you do it, repeat after me kind of fashion. It's more, I'm grounded. I'm connecting with my people. What do we need in this moment?
Yes. Yeah.
And you're thinking not only of the organization, you're capable of thinking holistically and understanding their individuated needs as well as the needs of the collective.
Right. And I think the hopeful thing about this is in a sense, we as organisms, as entities in the system, we're naturally endowed with the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. And what we've in fact done, especially for the higher levels of organization where you have well-educated people, if we spend a huge amount of resources and time to change our thinking to this very cold, logical, Cartesian mode of thought, but we still have all of this natural ability to shift into this new mode of thought, which is, for me, what I call quantum reality, your model. In a sense, all the pieces that we need to actualize that mode of thought exist in us and can easily be tapped.
Right.
Now, there is a bit of work, in a sense, because we're so attuned to thinking in these linear ways and these very structured ways. So there is a bit of self-work that everybody needs to do. But it's definitely something I think we can shift into relatively easily.
Yeah. Because if we're leading more from an inspired place, I think that would make a huge difference.
Yes, right. Yeah. And I think this is one of the questions that I often ask is why are we doing what we're doing? Yeah. And I had this visual the other night of a person on this little planet. It was this children's book that I was reading to my kids, and this person who lived on these little small planets, and they could just walk all the way around the planet, right? And this question of like, this person, why are you running? Where are you going? It's this very, in a sense, we're so conditioned to accomplish and achieve. I think we've lost the inspiration of why we're doing these things. And to find this, again, inspiration for deeper meaning, how we relate to everybody else in our ecosystems, the joy and the creativity and the flow and the energy that we can get out of being in an organization. Those are all things that really, to me, inspire and lead to dynamic organizations versus these kind of zombie corporations that so many people seem to suffer in.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's my favorite word because most people seem to be zombies.
Yes. And I in a sense, sometimes, when I talk about the quantum reality, it seems to be abstract and it's like, who cares about stuff? But then you can just look at people and the drudgery of their lives and they go to the office and they hate their job. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like this. We can bring life and vitality and creativity and energy and something that's really like feeding our souls. We can create that. It's just we just have to shift our mode of thought to get to that place.
And you have to care about people as much as you care about yourself. That whole I versus we thing, especially as a leader, you don't really and authentically care about people. It's just not going to work. You're not going to be able to connect and make all of this happen.
Yeah, and this is, again, for me, comes out of the quantum reality. The I, or the particle, is this Cartesian notion. When we look at quantum physics, there is no particle. There's just no particle there. All we have is this kind of interconnected waves. And so it creates this fabric of we, of where everything is together. And this is, in a sense, the reality that we live in. We've gone down this path of extreme individualism in our thinking, and it's always about I and mine. And what we've lost in the process is the we and ours. And we start to experience things like the tragedy of the common, which is the things that are actually ours, not mine, are being destroyed.
With that, I'd like to thank you, Edwin, for such a thought-provoking interview. Your insights will certainly help our audience to consider leadership from newer perspectives. You can find out more about Edwin on LinkedIn. This has been Yvette Bethel and Edwin Clamp, and we thank you for taking the time to join us on Evolve.
Thanks for listening to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. Visit ifbcentral.com to learn more about how you can reinvent your leadership and transform your team, starting with trust.